Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The unbeaten New Zealand heavyweight Hemi Ahio has been added to the Joseph Parker and Junior Farr undercard, which is taking place on February the 27th in New Zealand. So Ahio, who is currently 16-0, he will be facing the towering inferno Julius Long. And for me, this is actually a rather disappointing matchup, more for the reason that it's been done before. Hemi Ahio fought Julius Long back in 2019, and he got a relatively comfortable decision over 6 rounds over Long. So this is a blatant retread fight, and for what purpose? And heading into this fight card on the February the 27th in New Zealand, and the fact that the undercard really hadn't been confirmed until now, I was thinking, I can't expect much of Hemi Ahio, who he's going to face. It's probably not going to be anyone good. And Julius Long, at this point, he is an out-and-out journeyman now. He's 43 years old. He's got a record of 18-24. His best days were, a long time ago now. So the fact that they fought before, there was no controversy in the fight. Hemi Ahio bossed that fight, got a comfortable decision, and now we're seeing it again. And perhaps some of the reason is cost, and I'm sure that comes into it, but also potentially getting people in, especially at relatively short notice from elsewhere, bearing in mind that Julius Long lives in New Zealand. So he is American, but he's lived in New Zealand for quite some considerable time. So that will make it, in terms of making the match a lot easier, but there would have been some other names out there I would have preferred to have seen. And if they had to make it a domestic dust-up, it would have been better, to have Kikitoa Luteli. He's an unbeaten fighter, record of 7-0-1. And I think that in terms of Ahio, where he's at, he would have beaten Luteli. And actually, Julius Long had fought Luteli just his last fight out, and they battled to a draw. And Long dropped Luteli twice in that fight. So maybe that gives an indication of where Kikitoa Luteli's level is really at. But Hemi Ahio is one of these guys that seemingly is nowhere near a title. He's nowhere near a final eliminator. He's not ranked in a sanctioning body. He last fought in 2019. He's got a very pretty record of 16-0 with 11 knockouts. But what's he doing? Where's he going? Because it's not clear to me. And this is the reason part of the reason I'm disappointed with this fight with Julius Long, because we've been there, done that, got the postcard. And sure, they're probably going to say, hey, they've got this massive 7'1" guy. Ahio himself is 6 foot. There's a disparity. It's going to look like a bit of a freak show. But in the end, Ahio's class is going to shine through. And I'm hoping that they can actually, after this, start to get his career rolling. Earlier in his career, he had some promotional issues. He was out of the ring for a couple of years. He's made his way back, with some journeyman level sort of opposition type fights. But it's now he's got to actually sort of sink or swim. He is promoted by Lou DiBella. So, there's a pandemic going on, and I understand that. But there are other heavyweights that are sort of starting to make their way and making moves. Is Ahio going to be given the opportunity to be in a good fight? Because really he hasn't been in the sort of fights that he should be in his whole career. He's had some of the requisite sort of, incremental step-ups, but we're past the point where he should be facing a Julius Long because, even though he's only 16-0, he's been on the scene for quite some considerable time. He's been pro since 2013. And only 16 fights in that time. Sure, some promotional issues took a couple of years out of his career, but he hasn't really been moved that quickly, and the opposition hasn't been great. He's looked good in some fights, say Ali Kaiden in 2019. Kaiden was an undefeated fighter, but we really didn't know Kaiden's level. Since then, he had a fight against Joshua Tufti. That was a journeyman level fight, but, recycling Julius Long doesn't really do much for me. And I kind of wonder what's next for Hemi Ahio, and can they actually make something work for him? I would have rather preferred to have seen, if they could have made it in an ideal situation, Fa and Ahio, because I think that's a much more even fight at this stage for both of them. But they're stablemates with Lou DiBella, but also they train at the same gym, so probably unlikely that that's ever going to happen. But in terms of the New Zealand scene, there's only really 5 or 6 guys at any real level. You have Joseph Parker, Junior Fa, Hemi Ahio, Patrick Mailata, and then Kiki Toa-Luteli. That's probably the top 5, and then after that you can sort of debate, who is there or thereabouts. But yeah, it's a pretty thin scene. There's no real domestic rivalries that, seemingly he was going to be in. Hopefully they can get him a fight in Australia. I mean, Ahio versus Dempsey McKean. I'd like to see that. There are some fights that probably could be made. So yeah, this one for the undercard, Julius Long versus Hemi Ahio, doesn't do much for me. I kind of look at this and I'm not even sure how many rounds it is. It doesn't actually really say. It's not up on BoxRec yet. But for the rest of the card, it says that Nick the Greek is an exciting Gotham fighter, and we look forward to seeing him against Panovu Hilu. Fighting for the OPBF women's title is Ellery Malaysia versus and Lani Daniels. And Jerome Pamplone from Peach Boxing has secured an opponent versus Anthony Mutsa. Overall, the undercard's thin. I mean, it's just a reality. There's a lot of domestic matchups there, and some of them, they're okay for domestic, but this card is on pay-per-view in New Zealand. This is more of a sort of, it's just on a TV card as opposed to, at least the undercard. I mean, there's not a lot of quality there. Despite the sort of sales pitch which Duco Events will give, bearing in mind, Duco Events used to be the promoter for Parker, but Higgins, David Higgins, now manages / advises Joseph Parker, but his company is the one putting on the event from the event management standpoint, but the promoter of record is Matchroom and also DiBella Entertainment, Lou DiBella. So yeah, I mean, it looks like there's it's a relatively cheap card and not a lot of on the undercard at this point in terms of meat and fights to really go, wow, I really want to see that fight. But I mean, there may be some interest from others in some of these other undercard fights, but it doesn't do much for me. But this is the thing, it's a thin domestic scene in New Zealand. A lot of the quality fighters, they're at the stage where they're eliminators. They're past sort of being on these shows because they're going to be elsewhere, sort of in Australia or further afield fighting, etc. What do you make of this matchup? Julius Long, Hemi Ahio. I would expect probably we might just see the same result. Hemi Ahio, he boxes to a decision, looks pretty good in doing so, and it's, there's a contrast between the height, 7'1" versus 6 foot. Potentially we may see Julius Long get knocked out. He was knocked out a little while ago by Lucas Brown, so Hemi Ahio certainly does have the power if he can connect. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.